Hi folks, my name is Steve Svensson and I'm a Desert Storm veteran, 44 years old, and I'm an electrical contractor, and I'm concerned about our future, not only for my children and my family, but for all of mankind. I write a lot on the internet under the name Stomp K. My nickname is Stomp, and my middle initial is K. But I like to think that K stands for Kings, because I like to stomp on some fucking kings. This subject is about Synthia. Synthia is a synthetic organism created by J. Craig Venter. Now, Venter started off his career in the military. He was born in Utah as a Mormon, and then they were denounced and they moved around and stuff. His bio is pretty interesting if you ever want to read about it. It's on the internet available. And Venter became involved in the Human Genome Mapping Project, or that mapped the human genome. He ended up becoming the lead scientist in this genome mapping project, which led him to other things. He organized the J. Craig Venter Institute, or JCVI, and he spent several years traveling around on the world's oceans in a big yacht called the Sorcerer II, which was funded by this guy, the CEO or founder of Intel Corporation, who's also a Bilderberger. You can look that up. And I'm going to put a link down below that links my original thread on this whole thing, which has quite a bit of information and a lot of detailed stuff. So I'm just trying to bring this to people because there's so much information that sometimes people get turned off by all of the scientific evidence and lots of reading, etc. So this is going to be a quick overview of the whole thing. There's been a real good series of videos by a guy on YouTube goes by the name of BEEPEE, and he's been recording all this stuff that's going on down where the Gulf oil spill happened underwater. There's lots of evidence that these organisms are starting to group together and forming shapes, and you name it. There's a couple other people that do some pretty good videos too. Craig Venter created Synthia. Synthia is supposedly the world's first synthetic life. They're even calling him God and all this stuff. The truth is Venter needs a living cell to inject his chemical concoction into it, and then the chemicals take over the living cell only enough, pretty much like it's like 95% of the cell, but the cell remains like it looks the same as it was when it originally started. He was using goat cells, actually E. coli out of goats, okay? And so he's injecting this chemical concoction, it's 4 different chemicals, into this goat cell, E. coli goat cell, and then the chemicals take over and it becomes a synthetic living organism. Now, the crazy thing about it is he claims that this new synthetic organism is controlled by a computer, because the computer sets up the DNA chain in it, and he's even got markers in the DNA, so that when you can read this DNA, he can say, well, that's mine, I've got the trademark in it, and so you owe me. He's patenting this synthetic life. Now, if you go to the link below, you'll see that Craig Venter was awarded awards from Bush to Obama, they're all touting this guy as the great new God creating life. Well, that's debatable. But this is serious stuff. What I'm concerned about is this synthetic life he's creating basically feeds off of carbon-based entities. Oil, steel, anything that's carbon-based. Humans. So it's a self-replicating. So once the process begins, it replicates itself. Now they say that they have ways to shut it down in case it gets out of control. But like everything in science, it just doesn't always happen that way. And if there's people that really want to screw with the world, this is a good way to do it. So I wrote the thread on the David Icke forum, and it's been picked up around the internet. But it's called The Beast of the Revelation's name is Synthia. The reason I call it the Beast of Revelation is because my concern is they're using algae as the biocarrier, specifically cyanobacteria, or they call it blue-green algae. Now, if you look around on the internet and the news, blue-green algae is all over the planet right now, killing fish, shutting down lakes, you name it. It's supposed to go away when it gets cold, but it seems to be getting worse even though it's getting colder. It's starting to come winter, and the algae is still shutting down lakes. So there was a blogger who came out during the oil spill that said that they were using the Gulf of Mexico, Chesapeake Bay, and the Great Lakes as biofarms for this algae. Now, when this first came out, I kind of poo-pooed the idea because it was a little bit out there, and I was thinking, well, what is algae going to do any good for anybody? But now if you read the news, algae fuel is everywhere. In fact, I just wrote a thread today about the Navy buying $424 a gallon algae fuel for a ship they're using, and the fuel is 50-50 mix, so it's part diesel and part algae. Imagine if it was all algae, it'd be like $848, okay? So this algae, my theory is, and there's a lot of evidence to back this up, that this algae, they need a lot of it to produce what they want to. They basically want to poison the world's waters. Cyanobacteria grows a lot better in fresh water than it does in salt water. But they need a massive amount of this algae in order to do what they want to do. So the oil spill in the Gulf, in my opinion, was to feed Synthia, to be a feedstock for Synthia. And you'll notice that Michigan around the same time had an oil spill that actually ended up feeding into the Great Lakes. Now they'll say they didn't, but it ended up in the Great Lakes. And if you look at Lake Erie, they had a huge problem with algae. And Chesapeake Bay right now is the same problem. They have tons of this algae, and they're saying, well, a lot of people say it's oil, but it's algae. It's algae that looks and smells like oil because, and my concern is it smells like oil because this synthetic bacteria has taken over and it mimics the cells it takes over. So if it's taking over oil, it's going to mimic that, and it's going to look like oil. It's going to smell like oil. The coloration is different because of some of the oxidization, I think. And algae has different colors and stuff like that. But what happens when it gets big enough and Craig Ventnor decides to push the enter button on his software program that controls all of this synthetic organisms through a software program? he can create any kind of life form he wants. He's already said that that's his goal, is to create a new life on the planet. So technically, he could make the beast rise right up out of the ocean, and everybody who believes in God is going to freak out. So hopefully people will look into this a little further, because it's urgent. We need to pay attention to what's going on. Thanks for listening.